Well, hello everyone. We're kicking off some exciting new stuff here at the Upland Group and Boire.com, starting our podcast series. And I'm really excited that one of our very first guests is a real global and industry leader. Brendan, I'll let him talk a little bit about some of the stuff he's working on as we kick this off, but he's grown into an executive coach like I am. I think he's a visionary about the future of Ireland. We're going to talk a lot about that, and a real believer in the power of love and leadership. And I think we're really connected on that point. We met last year in Ireland at the Reinvention Summit, where I guess both of our good friends, Aidan McCullen, was launched this conference. Well, I think we'll probably get into that a little bit in our conversation here. And one of the things that Brendan's passionate about, and I'm also passionate about, is the future of Ireland.
Yeah.
He's in the game. I'm watching the game and trying to help a little bit from the sidelines. So welcome, Brendan.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to have you here as one of my first victims. I mean, guests
Thank you.
in the pod, and I'd
Mm.
love to. We're going to spend as much time as you like to talk about some of the work that you're passionate about. We want to talk about kind of the
Okay.
work you're passionate about, where you came from, where you grew up, and what do you want to be when you grow up, and talk a lot, I hope, about some of the philosophies you have for
Mm.
the future of Ireland.
Forward to that.
And so welcome, and
Thank you.
say hello to our hopefully thousands of viewers.
Yeah, I look forward to talking to you, Ron. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So we originally met in the spring of last year, right? So at our friend Aidan McCullen, and we'll give a little background on Aidan in the show notes and stuff. And for those of you who don't know Aidan was a footballer, which outside of the U.S. means a rugby player, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's a really incredible. I'm going to get him on the pod. He said he was going to get on the pod, Brendan, but he's one of those people that are so busy that I
Yes.
don't know when it's going to happen. But he's a guy, I guess he's now in his early 40s, right? Early to mid
Yeah.
40s, Brendan.
Correct.
And he was a footballer on the Irish national team.
Mm.
He's one of these guys that, like, you truly hate this guy. He's 6'3". He's
Yeah.
gorgeous. He's fit. He's smart.
He's
And
everything.
yeah,
Exactly.
he's all of that stuff. So when
Mm.
we get him on the pod, maybe I'm not going to show his picture, side by side. I'm not sure it's going to look good for me, but what I find most remarkable about him is the complete reinvention of himself.
Correct.
And I think he's a great analogy for what's going on in Ireland and where Ireland's going. And he had this passion about starting this conference called the Reinvention Summit, which was
That's right.
to kind of reinvent the reinvention of Ireland. And I
Mm.
guess that's what maybe we first met, and then how the
Yes.
connection was made with
Yeah.
Aidan. So tell me a little bit about kind of currently. I'd like to start a little bit with, like, currently, like, what are you working on? And,
Mm.
if we can start in the Reinvention, wherever you want to start, then
Yeah.
I want to go back in time and talk a little bit about your journey, because I think your journey is pretty
Yeah.
fantastic. And we also almost connected a couple of spots on
Yeah.
that
That's
journey
right. Yeah.
in
That's
the
right.
music industry. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So currently, I'm very privileged to be leading a number of leadership programs on behalf of the government. It's Enterprise Ireland, which is a government agency, and it was created to help our Indigenous companies to scale internationally. So I'm one of a team of people in the IUC Business School based out of
uh-huh.
Barcelona, some of the team from Enterprise Ireland themselves. So I'm what they call the lead business advisor coach. So I'm helping design, run, and manage a team of advisors and coaches. So
Uh,
it's the idea is that we take successful companies, so they've already succeeded. They're typically tens of millions up to hundreds of millions in turnover, and we're trying to bring them up to scale them internationally and make them world class. So we act as what we call business advisor coaches. So the team have been there, done that, worn the t-shirt themselves. So we act as advisors to the CEO and their senior leadership team. And then we also act as leadership coaches, and we flip between the two. So it's a year-long program. we cover about 200 CEOs a year across different programs and 30 CFOs, and most of them are CEOs. And the objective really for Ireland is we're trying to scale our indigenous companies. And in the current circumstances, our foreign direct investment has been obviously the growth engine of the Irish economy heretofore. Needless to say, we're all worried about that, given the economic environment that we're operating in at the moment. It's still really important to us. It's still very strong FDI, but our indigenous companies, we're trying to get them to scale and become multinationals themselves to continue to have the economic welfare that we have today.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting is there's this, I love the Enterprise Island
Yeah.
story. There's this, mythology that, all the goodness in Ireland came because of some tax laws, and then all the money magically fell from the sky, but that's really not the way it happened. I mean, it's certainly they got a little boost there, but,
Yeah,
um,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. We
so
people probably
go
came
ahead.
for different reasons, but I think any company that came, and as you know, most of the big US companies, in the pharma and tech, etc., have set up their European HQ in Ireland. I think a few things, in particular US, we've benefited massively from the US. I think we have a shared culture. Most of our people went to the US many years ago. We've shared values. And more importantly, then when they come to Ireland, they see that we have a highly educated population and, we've good, ethical, hardworking people. So we work really well together. So I think they might have been maybe attracted by tax initially, but when they get here, they become embedded and they realize that it's the place to be for innovation, reinvention, all the different things. We're quite creative. We're very resilient. So
Yeah,
we're,
that's
we're
for sure.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We keep reinventing ourselves. So it's the first time. Yes.
Yeah. So, on the education and kind of reinvention front, one of the things that so my business partner Rita McGrath, who I don't know if you've met Rita,
I've not
you
read
may
it
have
a few times. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, the world has met Rita. She's
Yes. Yeah,
she's one of
she's the
those
big
people,
one.
right?
Yeah,
Um, Rita was involved with some of the original Enterprise Ireland
that's right.
work,
Yeah,
30 years ago or so.
correct.
Um, and of course, John, her husband, is very Irish, so a
Yeah.
lot of passion around Ireland. But we've gotten involved a little bit with New Zealand, and
Okay.
one of the case studies for kind of the future of New Zealand has been like looking at countries like Ireland and looking at
Mm.
Singapore and looking at some of the Nordic countries and some of you look at a country with a handful of millions in population, and they have these great social programs. They have this great growth. So we actually
Mm.
brought a couple of CEOs from New Zealand to the Reinvention Summit. And one of the things that I discovered just kind of looking at Enterprise Ireland is they have this tremendous venture capital portfolio. And
That's right.
someone told me, I don't know if it's accurate, but it's probably directionally correct, that this one of the largest venture funds in Europe.
Tis the largest, yes, and most active
Yeah,
in Europe, all government backed. Yeah, so they're an amazing organization. They've up to 1,000 employees. The vast majority of any indigenous companies that are scaling internationally are what we call clients of Enterprise Ireland.
yeah,
They help you at all different levels. So they help you through funding, through grants. But some of the key supports are training, and that's the area that I'm involved in. Because believe it or not, the highest bang for the buck that we get as taxpayers to help grow our Irish companies is training. Leadership development
yeah,
is the key. And they've done a lot of research on this. So we are, in comparison to other countries, this is a very unique offering that the government do to help scale our companies. And the results we see are just outstanding. Mostly when people finish the programs, they say it was transformational for them as a leader, but equally for
yeah.
their organization and their teams. So that's the objective.
Yeah, I have this unfortunate past where I did a lot of work in private equity for a decade or so.
Mhm.
And one of the things that's absolutely true in that space is they're really good with the spreadsheet, but they don't understand the people.
Yeah,
And the leverage you get off of an empowered, motivated person
correct.
who's passionate about what they do is incredible.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah.
one of the concepts that I know that you're excited about is the power of love concept and how that affects leadership. And
Mm.
I think Freud, way back when, said there's only two things in the world that matter: work and love.
Mhm.
And I'll extend that to say, if you love what you're doing,
Yes.
life doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
yeah,
Mm.
give me a little bit of the framing about, so to that point, you're working with up to 200 CEOs a year. That's a really big number. What are the challenges? What's the focus? If you think about, I'm an Irish CEO.
Mm.
You're like, hey, Ron, you're doing a good job. Let's help you be great.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
Yeah. So we always start in the same place. The number one thing we start with is ambition. And believe it
Hmm.
or not, that is the single most important thing, because if a CEO of an organization doesn't have the ambition to go global or to scale or to enter new markets, create new products, innovate, whatever, it just don't is not going to happen. So we
Yeah.
start with ambition, and to trigger ambition, we obviously have joint conversations. But one of the key things we trigger in terms of ambition is a peer group. So call it peer
Hmm.
pressure, but peer conversation where one is saying to the other, and there are peers that respect each other and admire each other. We could do more. We could go faster, bigger, bolder. We could be more innovative, etc. So that's point number one. Um,
Hmm.
and the second part of it, I suppose, is once you've got the ambition, it is to understand their leadership in terms of motivating and having a very, very clear vision for their organization. So step two is that we jump in on vision. And I know some people might not rate a vision, but in every organization I created in the past, the vision was the most powerful thing that we did. And I remember years ago having a fantastic chairman in the UK, and he used to say to me, if you can inspire people to believe in your vision, the world will conspire to help you.
Yeah.
And when you talk about Aiden starting this podcast, look at a guy that just represents all of that. He had a vision to create the Reinvention Summit, to create his innovation show, and he just went and did it, and it became a reality. And as you correctly say, that guy's so busy now with what he's done with himself. But from being a rugby player to being, within the top 50 thought leaders in the world is an incredible journey. But that vision piece is critical to us. And once we have that, the next piece we go to is we make sure that everybody's aligned around a common objective, and that's mission and purpose. And that is really, really important in the modern world. Years back, it wasn't so important, but today, with the younger generation of a workforce, they really do care. They need to have a purpose. They need to. It's not just to make loads of money and to grow a business and hit commercial objectives. They really want to know that they're making a difference. So when we're doing companies that do anything, med techs, energy generation, making beds for somebody's home, we're really trying to focus in on the mission of why do we exist, and what's our purpose. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
we get into all the other stuff of mission, the values, the culture,
Yeah.
all the other things that you would have in a strategic growth plan.
So, and I think when, we talked a few weeks ago about this, which I just became really fascinated about, this is kind of a trip around the world, right? You're setting these CEOs up, um,
Yeah.
and first doing I love the qualifier around ambition. I think purpose, um, maybe the biggest qualifier for me. It's one of the things that I think about a lot, both
Yeah.
personally and with the companies I work with. Um, but tell me a little bit about the journey you take them.
Yeah.
You take them on around the world. Some of the best institutions in the world, and some of the biggest thinkers in the world, I guess, they get exposed to.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, our flagship program today is a thing called Leadership for Growth. We bring 37 CEOs on that each year. It started about 20 years ago with Stanford, and we sat down like Enterprise Ireland. In fairness, the CEO at the time, a guy called Frank Ryan, was uh, he understood the power of leadership and what leadership could achieve in terms of
Mhm.
supporting Indigenous Irish companies to scale. So they sat down with Stanford and they created an amazing program that's continued to grow and evolve over 20 years. So at the beginning, it was CEOs only. They realized they need to widen it to the SLT, that everybody needs to go on the journey together, that we
Yeah.
needed to create a strategic growth plan together, a leadership development plan together. And ultimately, it became a year-long program now that it is today. So today is what IAC Business School, which have hovered around number one, two, and three custom education university in the world.
Yeah.
They're one of one, two, three every year. They're amazing. And the reason why they're amazing to stand out, I suppose, university is they're very customized. And for us, small Irish indigenous companies relative, let's say, some of your giants that you'd have in the US, they customize things to make it really practical, really applied, and really good learning that can be implemented to scale the companies. So it is working really, really well. And hence the model. We have thought leadership at the front of the classroom, but it's all about peer learning. And they facilitate
Mhm.
peer discussions and peer learning. And then once certain things land for individuals, we then as business advisor coaches take that learning and we apply it to their business with their SLT in workshops, etc. So we're taking the learning from the classroom, applying it to their specific business, and hopefully getting implementation and results as a result of all of that. Mm.
So you talked about resilience, which I think is in today's society and today's leadership. I think one of the things that's missing a lot is this idea of resilience. And I think, of course, I don't know if I told you that my mother was a Noonan, and
Yes,
my
very
my
Irish.
uh, my son my son describes her, or just she's passed, but used to describe her as his badass Irish granny. And and the whole Noonan clan had this resilience to
Yes.
them, this kind of toughness.
Mm.
And I see that as something that's definitely missing. And you spent a lot of time all over the world, and I want to get into your journey a little bit too,
Mhm.
because I think your journey's been absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. Um, c- Give me a little comparison between what you see in kind of other global leaders, in particular, I think the US, and what you're seeing it with leaders in Ireland. And I'm
Mhm.
particularly interested in these issues around purpose and mission and resilience,
Yes.
and kind of the commitment to achieving.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I suppose we're very resilient as a nation because we're a very small island. So for entrepreneurs to grow a company of any significance and to make money or achieve your objectives, we have to get off island. So we typically are born with a global head on our shoulders. So from the day that I started as an entrepreneur, it was always global. We didn't think local. You start local, and because I say the other thing too that's unique to Ireland, when I remember going to different things and meeting US entrepreneurs, and we would be tiny relative to some of the US entrepreneurs in terms of
Yeah.
the revenues and the employees they have. But we've a much, much tougher market because it's so small and we're so innovative. It's so competitive. So we've so many companies, tech companies, med
Mhm.
tech companies, food companies, etc. And because we have such a very small market, we have to compete really, really hard to win business. I remember, for example, myself being in the mobile phone world and selling tech for digital media into a mobile operator in Ireland. And they had 1 million subscribers, like somebody like Vodafone, and
Yeah.
you would work for years to get in there and win a deal with them. And then I got on a plane one time and I went to the Philippines and I met Smart, Mobile with 24 million subscribers and brought straight up to meet the CEO, shook hands, said, let's do a deal
Yeah.
together, et cetera, et cetera. And I was blown away by, I don't mean it in a bad way, but how easy it was to do business internationally relative to how tough it was to do business in Ireland. So hence we tend to be very resilient. The one thing I
Yeah.
would say though about my counterparts in the US that we need to be better at is the mindset of the US traditionally has been very powerful, as in global dominance, the land of
Yeah.
opportunity. We're the biggest and the best, and that's the vision piece that you ultimately
Yeah.
do become. So some of the biggest giants in the world come from the US. We would like to adopt some of that thinking. As much as we're resilient and we achieve really good results when we go in and go international, one of the key problems and challenges we have in Ireland is that because it's so tough, we sell out. Our entrepreneurs
Yeah.
sell out when they're doing 40, 50 million. And mostly it's to de-risk because they're up against people that are better funded, more people, more customers, more everything. So we tend to sell out. So one of the key objectives we have is to turn, not to be the acquired, to be the acquirer. And that's a key theme that we're pursuing so that we have a more global mindset, that we're, funded and ready from a leadership point of view to take on the world and stay going,
Yep.
stay the course. Mm.
Yeah. I was talking to Sean, is it Sean Davies
Yeah.
from Enterprise Ireland? And he said that's one of the things that they're looking at with kind of the investment fund is like, how do you, if you're an entrepreneur, and I get this. I mean, again, I was in the valley of darkness in private
Mm.
equity for a while, and
Yeah.
you've been working your whole life or 10 or 20 years to
Yeah.
build a business, and you built it from no revenue to revenue, no profit to profit. And
Mm.
somebody comes along and says, "Hey, listen, I'll give you, $12 million for your business."
Correct.
And
Mm.
you're a poor kid that, grew up in Dublin. $12 million, that's life changing.
Yes.
It's
Absolutely.
generationally changing, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so these people were selling out too soon.
Yes.
And we're saying we're trying to get them to 50, and then we're trying to get them to 100, and then we're trying to get them to 200 million.
Correct.
And it's a real challenge, and I understand why it's a challenge. I mean, it's
Mm.
just
Yes.
I've been working hard. I've had nothing. My family is sacrificed. I've sacrificed, and here's somebody offering me something, and I could live the
Yeah.
rest of my life, and my kids
Yeah.
would be fine. And so I'm
Correct.
taking the money, right?
And that's a great thing. Again, the US investors, I've worked with many US investors in my career. You guys are very good at saying, your attitude is let's de-risk the entrepreneur.
Yeah,
Let's take that worry away from them and let them focus on scaling the business. We're probably the opposite. A lot of the European investors and Irish investors probably much more conservative. So they're the opposite view. They're kind of saying, let's keep them focused, let's keep them hungry, and let's keep them going because they'll keep scaling. Now that attitude is shifting and changing, to be honest. But
yeah,
the risks that are associated with trying to stay the course. So we're trying to make sure, and this is where government can come in and help, and they are doing a lot to help on this. But we need to be able to de-risk our entrepreneurs so they can stay the course. So as you correctly say, they're not worried about paying their mortgage, etc. Because as well, some of the tougher things that we have here is that you know entrepreneurship hasn't been celebrated in the past. So if
yeah,
you go bust here, you're pretty much on your own. You're not even entitled to social welfare at the level of everybody else because you didn't pay enough stamps. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, So
Wow.
yeah, it has been tough. So you're on your own, and I suppose there was a public perception as well that you've loads of money if you have a big company, but the reality often is very
Yeah,
different. Yeah, in terms of what's in the bank account, and you've remortgaged your house probably for your business, so
yeah,
you're highly leveraged, and hence the risk is very high. So we're trying to address that, and there is a lot of movement on that, including government talking about new investment funds.
yeah,
So in fairness, there's a lot of conversation at the moment about nationally, we've a lot of savings. People, were frightened by the last recession and price inflation, etc. So we've piles and piles of savings in households today that we're trying to get moving and put it into investments. So in fairness, government have said they are looking at a new investment fund like they have in Sweden with First North Nasdaq, where
yeah,
people can invest in indigenous companies on a small exchange and have a tax-free benefit of any gains. So that is being muted at the moment by government that they will do something radical to support our indigenous companies that are trying to scale because funding is still a challenge for us.
yeah. I think that's a huge opportunity for
Mhm.
Ireland. And, when you look at the U.S., again, I do business in New Zealand and other smaller countries, and every once in a while, Canada as well. And you get you get on a phone call, and somebody will say, "Hey, what's or a Zoom more accurately, what's going on in the U.S.?" And you've got all this tariff thing coming, and
Yeah.
all this. And my response has become, the U.S. economy is so resilient and so strong that no matter what we do, we can't mess it up. We just we keep trying to screw up this economy, and it just keeps
Mm.
getting stronger and stronger.
Yes.
And I think part of that is driven by this, it's okay to fail mentality. If you
Yeah.
listen to,
Absolutely.
Peter Thiel or Mark Andreessen,
Mhm.
we invested in 100 companies, and if 5 of them go, that's a win. And those 95 failures
Yes.
become people with founder or CEO experience, and they go, well, this person has failed before. Let's give them something to try again.
Yes,
And it's really that's just not the case in Europe. It's just not the case in
yeah,
a lot of the world. Now, I grew up
correct.
in a Japanese company. I grew up at Sony, and that's for
Yeah,
sure not the case in a
yes,
Japanese company,
yes.
where if you fail, you get the window seat and you get to sit there
Mm,
for 10 years looking out the window, and people go,
mm,
"Oh yeah, that's the guy that did the mini disc. We don't
yeah,
talk to him
yeah,
anymore."
yeah. That's so true. And we
Yeah,
all have that fear. Even myself, my father was an entrepreneur, and I saw him lose his business when I was about 14, 15. But back then it was unforgiving, so we had a tough upbringing because of it. So I saw the results of failure, and you didn't get a second chance back then. That was a long time ago now, but hence it made me like I'm a qualified chartered accountant. And the only reason I went down that route was to make sure that if I failed as an entrepreneur, I would always be able to get work, and I
yeah.
would never be hungry and not be able to pay the mortgage. So I
Even
was
if you
that.
had to be an accountant.
Yeah, 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 exactly. I deny it most of the time. I don't normally confess to being an accountant. Yeah,
I
yes.
do have to confess, I don't think I've shared my power of love chart with you, but we'll put it in the graphic here. But I do a 4 box because this thing started many, many years ago when I was being asked to go out and speak to MBA candidates
Yeah.
at universities. And one of the first this was back early 2000s, and I was asked to go to Harvard
Hmm.
and recruit some of their MBAs. But I was told, and as only Harvard would tell you, well, you can't actually recruit them. You have to give them something of value. It's not about you can't solicit them. And I was like, well, this is kind of odd because you're trying to get them jobs, but
Yes.
okay. So I came up with this idea to talk about my photography.
Hmm.
And as you might imagine, I'm not a world-class photographer, but I enjoy it.
Yes.
And so I created this presentation where I essentially said, listen, I was told that I can't recruit you guys. So I want to talk about my photography. I want to talk about photography. So I started to roll. I did Ansel Adams, Oak Tree at Sunrise, and talked about that famous picture. And then I talked about this guy, Chris Carter, who's nobody's heard about, but he's an environmental portraiture
Hmm.
photographer in rural Texas, and showed some of his photographs. And I could see the woman in the back of the room visibly start to sweat, right? Like she was in near panic mode about this guy. He's not going to talk about anything of any value. And then I said, listen, let's talk about. I want to play a game called the CEO game. So start telling me all the words that come to mind when you think of a CEO. And of course, they're like intelligent, strategic, you
Hmm.
know, driven, smart, all this. One of them, by the way, is tall because the average CEO in the U.S. is over 6 foot tall. And I said, well, you missed them all because the real word is love.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Yes.
I believe in the power of love, and I believe that people that love their work and love the people they work with create
Yeah.
amazing things. And I
Yes.
said, because we're at Harvard, and I know it's got to be on a 2 by 2, here's my 2 by 2.
Mm.
So on the y-axis is ability, and on the x-axis is love.
Yes.
And in the
Yeah.
lower left-hand corner, if you don't love what you're doing, you're not very good at that's called hell.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
And on
Mm.
the right-hand side, if you love what you're doing, you're not very good at, that's called the hobby. That's my photography, right?
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
and if you're really good at something but you hate it, I call that accounting.
Okay. Yes.
and uh, and of course, I always give a nod to the great Amir Ziv, who was the head of accounting for many years at Columbia, who was the only passionate accountant I ever met in my
Mm.
life. But Amir is a famous uh, uh, accounting professor at Columbia. And then in the upper right hand corner, where you love something and you're really good at it, that's
Yeah.
heaven.
You're in
And that's
flow.
what we're all trying to get to,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that brings me back to kind of this purpose and mission, because
Mm.
in my career, all of the failures, I mean, 100% of them have been because I was on the left side of the chart,
Yeah. Mhm.
meaning I didn't really love what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I was in it for the wrong reason. I might have been really good at it, right? I wasn't an accountant, but I was a private equity CEO and I knew how to do it. And like, this is not a complicated thing, but you're also dealing with, as I affectionately call them, amphibians and crocodiles. And so you're not you know how to do the job. You've done the job before,
Yeah.
but the net result is I'm not here to grow a company. I'm here to sell a company, and
Yeah.
frequently here to take it apart.
Yes.
And so that journey from the left side to the right side is all about finding the purpose and the
Absolutely.
vision and the principles that are
I'm passionate about it. I know it
supporting it.
says it a lot, but it makes such a difference. You can spot them a mile off. The
Yeah,
people with passion, vision, and commitment and real purpose, they just knock the lights out every time. You've seen that, I'm sure, as well. So
yeah,
yeah, total believers in that. So we're trying to find that, and when we're dealing with companies, we do interview them before they come on any of these programs to make sure they already have ambition, they already have some kind of a vision of where they want to get to, etc.
yeah,
And then we try to just light a fire under that and ignite it even more to push them on. You know.
yeah. And so I know your coaching is another big piece of what you do. Talk to me a little bit about but what that looks like for you personally and what that looks like for the ambitions you have for Ireland.
Yeah, well, as you know, in my past, I've been around the block. I had a lot of success, but also a lot of failure. I think you learn a lot from failure, and you
Yep.
got to pick yourself
That's where
up and brush
I got my
yourself.
PhD.
It's all right. Yes, well, you know, you learn a lot from it, and so from our point of view, coaching is very powerful, as we all know, but it can only go so far sometimes. So, what we know now is that with coaching, the answers are within, but often they don't know what they don't know. So hence you've got to flip to advisor and say, in my experience, and reframe and tell stories. So we use a lot of storytelling. And we find it very powerful to talk, you know, to depersonalize the conversation, particularly when you're dealing with something that's the burning issue of the day. And, you know,
Yeah,
we start our coaching sessions with what is keeping you awake at night.
yeah,
And that could be anything, but coaching, you can get through some of that. But then when you can say, well, in my experience, or I met somebody, and here's a story. Let me tell you the story about Joe Blogs or Mary Blogs about how they resolve this situation. So you're depersonalizing it, and then you can, like we do in the universities, when we're doing case studies. You know, you can get into
yeah,
very thorny subjects by using, you know, an unrelated character stroke company and then figure things out through that process. So hence we find the power of combining. Now it's very important that our advisors stroke coaches have been there and done that and have credibility at the level that we're operating at. So
yeah,
you've got to start with that. You got to be credible to this level of person, because by definition they're high achievers that they've already succeeded to an extent, and you're trying to bring them to that world class level. But once you can flip between the two, then between a coach stroke advisor, they wouldn't even know that you're flipping between the two. But
yeah,
it's a very powerful combination when you can get the right people sitting opposite the CEOs to help them grow both from a leadership perspective, in a personal sense too. And this is, you're right, where the love comes in, because wellness is a big component of it today, and we've a strategic partnership with the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, who are world
mhm,
leaders in positive health. So they've come in on board and they're helping us teach and also supporting our coaching, so we can hold the hand of our CEOs from a wellness perspective. So we're trying to give it a holistic approach. It's leadership, it's their personal well-being. To so we you know, one of the things, when I was on the road for years. You know, on a plane for 7 years all over the world. And I was like a zombie. You know, I was walking into walls because the bathroom was on the left on one hotel and then it's on the right the
yeah,
next night. And
yeah,
eating, you know, snacking in airports and going out for rich meals with senior executives, etc. Not seeing much of my friends and family, not eating well, not getting to the gym, etc. So, you know, I know how hard that is, and I know you need physical and mental wellness in order to go on a journey like that. So we do take a lot of responsibility, as in we care and we love these people that we work with. So we're minding them as well in the middle of this. We're not just saying scale your company so Ireland can be great.
yeah,
We're saying, you know, we'll look after you too, and we'll help you get that work-life balance right, and go on the journey. Because I remember at the end of one of these programs, we brought in a guest speaker who had been on the program a few years previously, and participants in the room said, they said, If there was one word that you could use to describe what you got from this program, what would that word be? Now, this guy had taken a company and might have been, I'd say it was about 10 million turnover, and he turned it into 50 million in the space of a couple of years. So he had done a multiple factor of scaling the business. But the word he used was calm. And through the program, he learned how to put in proper processes, controls, develop his leadership, delegate work and responsibility, etc., etc., etc. So instead of the firefighting down in the bowels of the business, we're constantly saying we want to teach you how to work on the business rather than in the business. This person was able to say, calm is the word I use because I've got my life back. I get my
Yeah.
work life balance, and it's a much bigger business doing much bigger and better things. But
Yeah.
calm is the word he used.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So I got into coaching by accident,
Like
which is
yourself.
how all the best things in my life have happened. It's how I met my wife, the whole 9 yards.
Ah, wow.
So, the Rita and I were doing a variety of work kind of in the right around COVID times. And every company we went to invariably would say, "Oh, this is really interesting. I love your strategic platforms and all the work that you're familiar with that Rita's done, but our leadership team's a mess."
Mm,
And it always came down to
mm,
like the team's a mess. And Rita kept saying to people, "Well, Ron's run a lot of companies. Maybe he can help."
mm.
And so one of these companies said, "All right, I have a couple of leaders that need a coach." And I said, "Sure, I'll do that." I'm like, I've had a coach.
Yes.
I've never had a great coach, I can tell you
Mm,
that. I've had interesting coaches that were helping me with segments of my life. But when you say this coach advisor
yeah.
relationship, first of all, I had to figure out like what does it really mean for me to be a coach? Because I'm not a behavioralist. I haven't
Yes. Mm,
studied anything. I don't know how people's brains work other than I've worked with thousands of leaders like you have.
mm.
And I sat down and I said, when it was going really, really well for me, what was going on? And the answer was I was physically healthy, emotionally healthy,
Yeah.
and mentally healthy. And
Yes.
my family was healthy and my team was healthy. And when it
Absolutely.
wasn't, I was never healthy.
Correct. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
authentic, and you have to arrive at that session authentic, and you have to
Yeah.
have the balance yourself. You can't be holding somebody's hand to get there if you're not there yourself. Yeah. It's so true. And our best
Yeah.
coaches are all there. They're all in good places. It's a key criteria. They've
Yeah.
been there, done that. They've had their hardships too, because like there's nothing as great as having an appreciation for things based on what you've been through in the past. So you
Yeah.
appreciate everybody and everything. And the one thing I would say, I definitely say it was the best job in Ireland. Um, but the people I meet are so interesting. Everybody at this level have a really, really interesting story. So every time I sit down and meet these people for the first time, I'm going, wow, it's so interesting to hear your story. So,
Yeah.
that's the real benefit. And when you care about that, and it comes back to, as you said earlier, when you care about people and you love them, uh, it really does give you an empathy and a listening that you just go, wow, that story is incredible. So, for
Yeah.
example, even with coaching, I'd start often with the coaching session by saying to somebody, tell me about your life since the time you were a child, and tell me, your family, your family's what they did, how you
Right.
interacted with your siblings, and all the way through your career to where you are today. And it's so interesting when they do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I learned that technique years ago when I was at Best Buy, and they had
Yeah.
this fascinating process where Brad Anderson, who was the CEO then, and frankly one of the best CEOs I've
Yeah.
ever worked with, and one of the best humans I've ever worked with.
Yes.
He's the one that introduced me to servant leadership and
Yeah.
the concept behind servant leadership. But he was big on education, and you would start your tenure. I started there as an executive vice president, but I started at Best Buy University like everybody else did. And like one of the things they did, which was absolutely fascinating, is you draw your lifeline. You do a little 2 by 2 and you say, okay, I was born and then these
Yeah.
things happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and every single person I've ever seen do that, you go, my God, the journey they've been on. There's no boring people in the world. Very, very few. If
It's
you
so
really just like, how did
mm,
you get here? I mean, I guess I guess if you're born with enough money in your pocket, you could be pretty boring, but most people are just not boring. They've been on
Yeah.
this journey that
Correct.
everyone can learn from
Mm.
if you can listen,
So true.
uh,
Mm.
listen, correctly. A
Yeah.
couple of things I wanna circle back to, mission and purpose a little bit, and then I wanna kinda get it a little bit into your journey, but,
Yeah.
um one of the things happening, so I'm going to another AI conference in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about AI, 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 and you see these, Microsoft just laid off more people because of AI, and Amazon just laid off more people because of AI. And um, I've been using this phrase, and I did a keynote for a large insurance company last week, and we talked about this as well. You're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by somebody who uses it better. I don't
Yes.
know if that's true or not. I don't know. We all say it because
Mm.
I think we want it to be true.
Yeah.
Um, how are you thinking about this in terms of what you're about, talking
Yeah.
about with your CEOs, what Enterprise Ireland's talking about
Mm.
with their companies?
Mm.
Then there's two big components here. The one is obviously the technological component, and
Mm.
then I use AI. I use Claude. Claude
Okay.
did a profile on you that I was like,
Really?
wow. It's just, I mean,
Mm.
it's it's amazing the profile that Claude did on you,
Wow.
in about 10 minutes that it would have
Mm.
taken me. I don't know if I ever could have got this detail. It would have
Yeah.
taken me a week to do this.
Yes.
So I can see that I see the power of this
Mm.
when I said, "Hey, tell me who this guy Brendan Dowling is, and
Yeah.
he's gonna be on the podcast, how do you think he's gonna behave?" And literally Claude said, "He's Irish, so he's gonna be self-deprecating."
Wow.
Right? So let him tell the
Wow.
stories and don't let him self-deprecate too much and, get
Wow.
to the real story. Don't let him say, "Oh, shucks, it's no big deal." Literally, it's in your I didn't write that, Claude wrote that.
That's
So when I
incredible.
say this tool is
Mm.
so good,
Yeah.
what does it mean to your companies and what's it mean to your CEOs, and how are you thinking about that?
Yeah. So, yeah, we've had a lot of different conversations, a lot of different professors coming in as well, a lot of practitioners coming in. So, absolutely, it's revolutionizing the world, and the world of work as we know it is transforming rapidly. And it's the speed of transformation. I know I'm saying what everybody else is saying, but when you speak to these CEOs and they're starting to tell you, so for example, working with a major construction company, the CEO said, I didn't really understand this. So I hired a really, really top thinker in AI and I paid a fortune for him. And we did a 1 week workshop. He said at the end of that, he said, it's writing my government tenders, which are really complex tenders. It is now negotiating my contracts with me. I haven't spoken to my lawyer since I've adopted AI. It's giving better insights and getting my contracts done faster. If I win a
Yeah, yeah,
contract, it's setting up my bills of material and my project planning. So it's revolutionized something that most of us in the room would have thought, well, construction might take a little bit longer before AI hits that. So
yeah,
that's the things that is revolutionizing. But equally, my sister is a young child that's doing what we call the leaving cert here and about to go to university or applying for university. And she said to me, could you have a chat with my son because he hasn't studied a lot, you know? And I sat with him and I said, here's my view of the world. So in my world, when I qualified and started looking at university, it was a rat race of academia. You had to learn off stuff and regurgitate it in order to get into the professions, which was law, medicine, engineering, etc., etc. In my view, that world is now pretty much gone as we've known it, which means that the people who are more resilient, better communicators, love each other in terms of relationships, are innovative, creative. There's a whole new world opportunity for these people because they can leverage the power of AI and solve problems that they could have never done. And knowledge is now pretty much a generic in this new world. So I see huge opportunity for a whole new crowd of people who heretofore weren't good at remembering things and regurgitating things, which I wasn't. I was an entrepreneur, so I was a dreamer. So I got into terrible trouble in primary school and secondary school because people thought I wasn't smart because I couldn't regurgitate the stuff that was being beaten into me, metaphorically, obviously. And yeah, but I was an entrepreneur, so I was a problem solver and a dreamer, and it's the dreamers that change the world. But if I had
Yeah.
had the power of AI in front of me and that knowledge at my fingertips, God knows what I could have done with it. So I think it's a huge opportunity as well as a threat. So it's a threat to traditional academia in terms of jobs that the lawyers, the accountants, et
Okay.
cetera, et cetera. Like, so for example, we had an AI expert in finance that came in, and they're venture capital and AI finance tools only. And we had them in with us on one of our programs. And he showed a single slide of a man standing on a skyscraper in New York. And he just said to everybody in the room, that is the finance department of the future. And he said, that future is now for those that adopt it, but you will not have people in your finance department. It'll be somebody who's strategically aligned with all the other departments of the business and represents the finance function. Now, I would agree with that. Now, the other thing I think too, though, on AI is I also think it's an incredible thing. Like I see my mother at home at the moment, living in the country alone. My father's gone. Um, and she's craving company. I think
Yeah.
AI, like, I know Alexa and a few of these things that frightens her. But AI is somebody that can relate to her, understand her, and speak to her in a tone and in a way that can become a friend in time. Now, that might have to be caricatured in a teddy bear or something like that, so it's
Yeah.
not a threatening thing. But I do see having really engaging conversations and, making isolation something of the past, and for people to share knowledge, have, entertainment, somebody to do things for them that she cannot, for example, select anything on Netflix. I have to select a movie for her and press play before I leave the house. She
Yeah.
can't and will not navigate it. Now she's 88, but with AI, once she's comfortable, she could say, please play me Casablanca or whatever her favorite movie is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that so part of the answer is learning what those leverage points are, right? So I think about how I might use it, and we do work with some pretty large clients that are building AI tools.
Mm,
One of the things that is interesting, so you may be familiar with Rita's concept around seeing around corners and,
yeah. Mm,
inflection points. And we've created a model where, you start with kind of what do you think the future is? Call it the concept of seeing around corners is
mm,
look 5 years, 10 years into the
yeah.
future. And I actually think it's easier to predict 10 years out than 10 minutes out. But and so robotics, for example, when you say, a theory would be in 10 years, there'll be 5 billion or a billion bipedal robots in the world that
Mm,
will, do everything from lawn care to
yeah.
surgery. And
Mm,
that's how, that's what the world's going to look like. And if you listen to people like Elon Musk and
mm,
others, you just say, well, it's a fact. They're so
yeah.
passionate about it. It's going to happen.
Mm,
But but the question for the business becomes what's the tipping point and like how do you track these things? So you may have several of these ideas. And previously you would say, okay, well, you use this idea of backcasting and say, well, in 2036, there'll be a billion robots. So what does that mean in 2033 and
mm,
2031 and 2029? And what would be the headlines in the newspaper? And what are the things you look like? That starts to become a very complex task, right?
yes. Mm,
And so you start to track all, dozens and dozens of data points. Well, now with AI, not only can we create the backcast and say,
mm,
here's all the things, the scenarios that would be true that would lead up, one, two, and three, finally become a billion bipedal robots.
mm,
You can get it to track hundreds of thousands or millions of data points that you
mm,
couldn't possibly do before.
mm,
So does it eliminate the job of a strategic planning manager? No. Does it change the job dramatically? Yes.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And then the question is, so the training and support uh, for that become critical. I mean, back
Yeah.
to kind of this comment. There's only two things in the world that matter: love and work.
Mm,
In the work you do with your CEOs, finding a CEO that understands that the mission and purpose of the company is the real work,
yes.
right? It's not making the bed frame or the rocket or the whatever it may be. It's
Yeah.
that, getting that purpose right, getting
Yes.
that clear gets
Correct.
people motivated to, if you will, fall in line to
Yeah.
find their mission and purpose and align it. I was
Absolutely.
with, like I said, I was with an insurance company last week, and you could put them in the accounting bucket if you were a cynic, right? But
Mm. Yeah.
these are people who are fantastically passionate about what they do because
Yes.
they provide a service that if somebody's house burns down, they rebuild it.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yes, they make a profit doing that as well. They should.
Mm.
But you could be a cynic and say, well, it's insurance, and you know,
Yes.
you know, uh, it's a product you hope you never use, right?
Mm.
So you spend all this money on it, and hopefully in your whole life your house won't burn down.
Yeah.
But if it
Exactly.
does, they're passionate about, we're going to get in there and we're going to,
Yeah.
make
It's
sure the house gets rebuilt and make sure it gets rebuilt the way it was and replace what we can replace. So finding
yeah.
that passion is important.
Yeah.
Um, when we talked earlier, um, you gave me this incredible journey through your life as an entrepreneur, and you said you studied accounting as a safety net, and thankfully you became an entrepreneur, so we get to meet.
Big.
One of the things that I thought was fascinating is that you were in the music and the digital audio business at the same time I was.
Yeah.
And in fact, we had a lot of the same kind of connections, but
Yeah.
I don't know that we were ever in the same meeting room at the same
Probably not.
time. But we were in the same building at the same time. I'm quite sure that we were probably both at 550 Madison in New York
Yeah.
at the same time on different floors. Take me back to the beginning. So, you know, growing up as a kid in Ireland, and
Mm.
I imagine the times you were growing up, it wasn't the age of abundance. So
There wasn't. Yeah. Yeah.
tell me how you got kicked off on this journey, and
Mm.
where did it take you?
Yeah. It's a good. So I suppose I was a gatherer hunter as a young guy. So lived in the country in the middle of country Ireland. So shot and fished for our supper. Literally shot pheasants and rabbits and you name it. Fished for salmon and sea trout. So that was kind of the upbringing. There was 8 children in a farming environment. So hence I was the gatherer hunter type guy. But was
Yeah,
born to be an entrepreneur. I was a dreamer, and I couldn't stop the dreams. I was dreaming of flying. Literally, I used to dream of running down the schoolyard and putting my arms out and taking off. They were my nightly dreams. But wanted to see the world and wanted to do things differently to everybody else. So I was always a bit of a black sheep too, which I didn't understand at the time. But my first real venture, I always had a work ethic. But my father, unfortunately, when he did go bust, it kind of was a wake up call because I was going to take over a family business. But my first business was when I was actually in KPMG. I loved aftershave, and I had my favorite aftershave at the time was Ralph Lauren.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember saying I could make that, and I could make that better. And
Yeah.
I remember in KPMG saying, I'm going to make the best aftershave in the world. So that was the vision piece. Now everybody laughed. In fact, they bent over laughing because,
I just laughed.
yeah, yeah, an Irish guy, from the middle of nowhere, making an aftershave that only the French do and the Americans do. But I always started at the top. I don't know what it was. I always knew I had to start at the top. So I would have gone to the number one department store in Ireland, which was Brown Thomas. I met the little old lady that was the buyer of cosmetics. And I shared my vision with her and I said, I'm going to make the best aftershave in the world. Now, needless to say, she didn't believe a word of what I was saying, but KPMG gave me credibility. So in the end, I wore her down with my passion and my vision. And she
Mhm.
said, okay, if you make it, I'll buy it, but it has to be better than Ralph Lauren. So it took me a year to do that, but I did. And I came back to her and we put it on the same shelf as Ralph Lauren. And first year of sales, I outsold them 10 to 1. And the rest is
Wow,
history. Yeah, a
that's
long story.
amazing. What was it? What was it called?
It's called Nautique, Nautique, and it had a navy box, and the emblem was a yacht in full with full spinnakers, etc., in gold embossed writing. So it did very
Yeah.
well. But that was the beginning. It's a long story what happened subsequently. But then when I became qualified and got out into the market, I really wanted to get into something that was going to change the world. And that for me, I started playing with mobile phones. I was probably mobile
Mm,
phone user number 100 in
yep.
Ireland. I used to sell them and put them into cars. So I remember going in, Mr. Tony Ryan, who was the owner of Ryanair, putting a mobile
Yep.
phone in his Mercedes S class and driving it around the city for the day while I put a mobile phone in it. But then I started renting mobile phones because nobody could afford them, and then ultimately created what they call a mobile virtual network operator. Very disruptive
Yep.
business model. But again, I had a vision to say I can offer the best mobile phone service in the world by offering good customer service, good billing, clarity, etc. That took off. It was so disruptive that Vodafone bought it to bring it back in to their mothership. Then the next round, I ran the third mobile operator in the country called Meteor and helped them go after a mature market and again, disruptive strategy and strategic thinking. We were some of the first to go after children in the market in terms of topping up and all you could eat. And it became a compelling value proposition and we won
Yep.
20% market share. And then finally, I ended up doing digital media because it was the next generation of where the mobile phone was going. And so I could see that people wanted to consume content on a mobile. That was what my vision of where it would go. Many boardrooms said to me that'll never happen. Nobody would ever watch a movie on a phone that's the size of a matchbox. I disagreed. I fundamentally, again, it's the dreamer. It's kind of where will the world be in 5 to 10 years' time? I was always that dreamer. And I created that company and scaled that and sold that to British Telecom. And that was when I started to meet all the big blockbuster digital guys or content guys that were trying to go digital. And we were the groundbreaker. So meeting people like Disney, Time Warner, EMI, music industry, etc., which was all transforming with digital. It was a whole new thing. So that's kind of the general background.
Yeah. So the commonality there is this vision and this innovator's spirit. What is the thing that tied this all together for you?
Yeah, well, it was always a vision. I would say I was being a dreamer. I always had a vision of where the future would be. And I always challenged everybody when people were saying, so for example, in a mobile phone world years ago, we were making a fortune out of selling calls and selling text message. I could see Skype, I could see WhatsApp. I said those things eventually will become zero. There'll be no revenue in it. So for
Yeah.
me, everybody said the next big thing was going to be paying a premium for a video call. We paid €1 million to a consulting firm in one of the mobile operators to tell us that the next big thing is going to be video calls. And I fundamentally
You
disagreed
want
with
to tell us who the consulting firm was?
no, we're based in the Nordics. That's as much as I'd say. But I fundamentally disagreed with it, and I said no way would I pay a premium to look at my boss or to see my staff, to crack a dawn on a mobile phone, etc. And so I knew it'd be more social use, which is what it became. But I kind of held the line on things like that. The same with content. When people were saying, that people won't watch content on a mobile phone, I was always saying if the content is compelling enough, people will use a mobile phone. So I had many arguments. I remember when iTunes was first launched, well, we had the equivalent of it. But when iTunes was first launched, people said radio's dead. And I was in a boardroom full of radio investors. And they said radio's dead now because you can have any playlist you want. You can create your own playlist. And I said, guys, you're forgetting one major thing. I said, when you look at a radio, you press one button and that button says entertain me. And
Yeah.
that is what people will not do. They'll make one or two big playlists, but they will not entertain themselves and keep making you create playlists. So radio has continued to blossom. It hasn't
Yeah.
disappeared.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's interesting. I was like you, probably involved in a lot of the digital radio initiatives, and USADR was a big one here. I don't know if you bumped into those guys. And I remember back when USADR was launching, I was running the audio business at Sony in North America. And I remember having the meeting with USADR, and they were like, so what we're going to do is we're going to make everything digital here, and all these analog radios are going to go away. And I remember looking at him and going, so you want me to tell my grandmother that her radio won't work anymore? Is that where you're going with this?
That's what.
And he goes, yeah. And I said, Virginia Noonan's not giving up her radio. You guys are going nowhere. And
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, to this day, you still buy a car and it's got an analog radio, and you still have
Mm,
the digital sideband stuff. And but it's just
yeah.
radio's about
Mm,
community. It's about
Yeah.
information and it is about entertainment. I'm a huge radio fan, as you can see behind me. There's a
Yes.
very old Macintosh AM/FM radio sitting back there. It's right
Oh
there.
yes.
I'm a big fan of the blue dials, despite my Sony upbringing. Um, so yeah, we didn't run into each other around the music thing. I was running the audio company at Sony, and you were trying to convince Sony Music to let you play a song on a phone at the same time Steve Jobs was just doing it and not asking permission. So I guess the
Yeah.
lesson there is don't be part of a big company that wants to ask permission. Just be part of an upstart. Um,
Yes. Yeah. True.
yeah. So,
We did
um,
convince him though. For Nigeria, I think I
yeah.
told you that.
Eventually, it all got there, right?
Yeah.
I do recall
Yeah.
this, and you remember the Secure Digital Music Initiative,
Yes.
SDMI, I'm sure.
Mm, mm,
And
mm,
I was assigned by John Breach, who was the president of Sony US at the time, to be the person
mm.
who kind of sat in on SDMI. Actually, it might have been Fujio Nishida that assigned me, but somebody said, "Hey, go sit in on this and make sure nothing happens." Just it wasn't hard to make sure nothing happens because it was one of the
I know.
stupidest ideas ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the listeners, SDMI stood for Secure Digital Music Initiative, and the record companies and some of the electronics companies had this brilliant idea that somehow they could put a digital wrapper around all
Yeah.
these MP3s that were running wild in the internet and
Mm,
nobody would be able to transfer them from one
mm,
device to the other, and
yeah. Mm.
that went exactly nowhere. But it took about 2 or 3 years for it to go nowhere, as I
Yes.
recall.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and
And that
so
was
so
part of what we teach because, I remember years ago, one of the things I did build was a streaming service that could do exactly what Netflix did before Netflix. And I remember going to the CEO of our biggest, there were blockbusters, they were called Extravision in Ireland, and going to them and they had 156 retail stores renting videos from a retail store. And I remember saying to them, listen, I have the tech. I have the library of movies that I had secured. And I said, I'll give it to you free of charge. We'll do a 50-50 revenue share. Will you allow me stream movies through your retail stores and upsell it? And absolutely no way, because I said that is a massive distraction. You might do 5 videos in month one, 10 month two. That's versus millions of videos that we're renting every month.
yeah,
And no way would they do it. And they couldn't see where the future. The company doesn't exist today. It obviously folded,
yeah,
as all of those video retail stores did. But they're the type of things and the battles we had. Sometimes I would have said that maybe leading edge, bleeding edge, because
yeah,
sometimes I was too far ahead and trying to convince people to do things differently. So, for example, for me, my son said to me recently, what do you see the next big industry or next big business? And I said to him, I said, look at an industry that's broken. And in Ireland and most countries in Europe now, the transport is broken. It's certainly broken in Ireland
mm,
because we have very bad national infrastructure. So traffic in and out of Dublin City is hours and hours wasted in traffic. So when you've got
yeah,
something like an industry like that's totally broken, something has to come and fix it. And to me, that's going to be drone transport. And that's
yeah,
going to happen very, very fast, where all of us will travel by drone. And if I was investing today, I'd be preparing for that. It's going to be like the mobile phone revolution. It's going to be a revolution of transport, and a drone will land in my garden. I won't own it. I won't fly it, and it'll bring me where I need to go, and it'll come back and collect the next person, and off it goes. Now it's happening, but it's not happening en masse. But when you see what's happening in the EV market with batteries, etc., it will happen very, very fast, and it'll be an
yeah.
incredible industry.
Yeah, there's little teeny bits of light in that space here in New York with
Mm,
some.
mm.
I think one of them is actually run by one of the guys that was uh, the CFO of Sony US is now the CEO of one of these
Oh, it's all
drone
right.
transport, which are
Yeah,
essentially little helicopters. They're not the drone as we would think about drones,
yeah,
or I would think about drones at least.
yes.
I think, one of the one of the organizations that we work with is in the transportation industry.
Okay.
And if you think about, and they own 400 plus thousand trucks. And if you think of what's going to happen to that
Yeah.
truck in the next 10 years, it's pretty
Mm.
astounding
Oh,
between
absolutely.
autonomous vehicles,
Yeah,
different energy sources, um, robotics,
yeah, yeah.
even nanotechnology and how that's going to affect the supply
Mm.
chain. Those are the problems that are really
Yeah,
fun to work on
because like at my
because
own, I live on a farm here. My wife's a farmer, and it's very hard to get labor today to work on a farm and do some of the jobs that have been done all the years. But we see technology is really starting to come into the farming world with modern
yeah,
tractors. But we'll have autonomous vehicles very soon. They're there today. They're just very
yeah,
expensive. But when you go out and want to spray a field, the labor and thinking has gone out of it with technology and GPS, and
yeah,
that's going to revolutionize the farming world. But significant investment to achieve it. But the cost of this technology is reducing day by day with AI and all the other software development tools that are available.
yeah. Well, you see even the cost of compute, the drop of
Yeah,
the cost of compute in just the last 12 months is astounding.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if you saw that video of the Chinese robotics company. We'll put a link to it in the video and I'll send it to you if you haven't seen it. But
Hmm.
I mean, it's just stunning what these bipedal robots can do. I know that Tesla has announced that um, they'll be in production at the end of this year and into next year, and there's a couple other bipedal robot companies. I said to my wife, I said, so when I go to Arizona, I always take a Waymo, and
Okay. Hmm.
it's they're kind of fighting their way through regulation, and I think
Yeah,
Tesla will be
that's
shipping at the end of the year their autonomous
yeah. Hmm.
self-driving cars, fully self-driving.
Hmm.
And
They're
I'll
amazing.
sit in the back of this Waymo and I'll take a little video of it
Hmm.
and I'll send it
Same
to
here.
my wife and she'll write back every time. That freaks me out.
Yeah, correct.
But
Yeah,
but the math is overwhelming. The Waymo is, 20 times safer than you and
yeah.
I. I mean,
Yes.
I think I used to be a good driver. I probably
Mm.
never was. I'm definitely
Mm.
not a good driver anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
And I get distracted. I'm like,
Mm.
you know, I'll drive someplace and then I'll think, well, how did I don't even remember driving
Yeah.
here. So how good a driver was I?
Correct.
But the Waymo and
Yeah.
these autonomous vehicles are one step,
Ahead.
and I think there's a future where we don't own a car. I mean, to your point with
Oh
your
yeah.
drone, I push a
Air
button on my phone and
like
a nice
yeah.
sedan shows up and it takes me to the play and I can have a
Right.
drink and not worry
Yeah,
about
that's
getting in
right.
my car. It takes me home.
And as you say,
Um,
it's safer because we have, God forbid, we have a lot of tragics on our road today. But if you compare road safety to, let's say, air traffic control, like Ryanair, thank God, has never had an accident. So when you
mhm,
compare that, if you apply the air traffic control logic and AI to drone transport, it will massively
yeah,
reduce because human error is always the factor, isn't it? So when
it's always yeah,
yeah. So hence, you can be, I say it to my children, I have 4 children, they're driving all the time. I say, it's not you, it's the other person. So always expect the unexpected as a human driver.
yeah,
But as you correctly say, I think it's going to eradicate some of the problems we have on our roads, which is an
yeah.
amazing
When
thing.
you think about how it's going to change your infrastructure, if I don't own a house or don't own a car, I don't need a garage.
That's right.
All of a
Exactly.
sudden my housing cost changes and my utility changes on my house. And, the
Correct.
same thing with with robotics. I say to my wife, I said, if you could buy a device for $30,000,
Mm.
which is kind of what Musk is saying the entry level is, which means it'll be 50, but whatever. So if you could buy it for 30,000 and it'll clean your house, do your laundry,
Yeah.
mow your lawn, do your dishes, make you dinner, would you do that? And
Mm.
it's like, oh, absolutely, I would do that. Of course I
Of
would do that. Think
course.
about your mom. She would say, "Can you turn on Netflix for me?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
No.
like, think about the car that you have outside your door today. What have you paid for that? And that will be potentially gone. Apart
Yeah,
from the fact that I like the touch and feel of an engine, which is some of
yeah,
our petrol heads. But apart from that, you won't need it anymore. So you'll replace your car with the robot, and you'll use that
yeah,
same disposable income to pay for the robot. And the key thing about this is it's going to give you back so much time that you didn't otherwise have. Like the amount of
yeah,
jobs like cutting grass or cutting a field of corn or whatever that we do here, we're constantly going. But if somebody gave you back all that time, what would you do with it?
yeah. So
You'd have,
that's the big productivity boost
mm.
from AI. And I like cutting the grass in April and May, but by August, I
You're
don't
kind
want
of,
to cut the grass anymore. It's no longer therapy. Now it's a job, right? It's therapy in April and May, and it's a
mm,
job in August and September.
yes, yeah,
And we live in an incredible time, and our
yeah,
children live in an incredible time that
absolutely.
But
Mm,
this transition, and this is, kind of back to your mission and a little bit of my mission. Uh, the the mission is, how do we, as a society, how do we get through this? How do we
mm,
make this transition? How do we move from a lot of doers to a lot of makers and creators and thinkers?
mm.
What does that look like? How do we leverage up this technology? Will the technology, in fact, become what we think it can become, or does this thing stall? I mean, those are all the kind of
Yeah.
really, to me, really interesting
Well,
questions.
the key question that I was addressing when we were at the Reinvention Summit was our educational system. It's our educational system has been designed around, as I say, regurgitating and memorizing and learning different things that we've done in the past. But I think this new world, we're going to have to tap into creativity, communications, resilience, all those things, leadership, all those things that we haven't been teaching in our school curriculum have now
Yeah,
become critical, not only to adopt and work in this new world, but equally for mental well-being, which, as we all know, is on the rise in terms of our younger generation are suffering very badly, and it's a curve that's just going up and up and up in terms of the suffering, and it's because they're not playing, they're not allowed to be
yeah,
creative. They're not using their talents in the way that they could, et cetera, et cetera. And don't get me wrong, some do and a lot do, but I do think we have to reinvent our educational curriculums to be ready for this new world and allow children to be more creative. And I think there'll be more time for creativity if we facilitate it, but it doesn't exist it's very a minor component of our curriculum today in comparison to what it's currently teaching. So teaching, I don't mean in a bad way, teaching maths and teaching, you know, Shakespeare, etc. I know I'd be criticized for saying these things because they are great too. But couldn't we be teaching people how to handle conflict, how to navigate their way through, be resilient online, and how to communicate online, how to hold their own, and how to be creative and tapping into different aspects of creativity that they might be good at, etc. There's a whole world that is untapped, and if we don't allow ourselves to change, and it's always hard to change. Nobody likes change. We're all creatures of
yeah,
habit. We all like to do what we always did, but you
yeah,
got to be brave, and that's the bravery that we're trying to. That, in fairness, the Irish government, that we've reinvented ourselves a number of times. The last time we had the crisis in 2007, when we had the last recession, the Irish government created what they called the Global Irish Economic Forum, and they brought
yeah,
Irish leaders from all over the world, 300 of us, into Dublin Castle, and we sat there for a long weekend with the Prime Minister and our ministers and top entrepreneurs and top thinkers from all over the world. And we came up with loads of solutions. Like, so for example, national broadband came out of that thinking to
yeah,
say it's critical to our future that everybody has good broadband in their home. Like me here on a farm, up a few years ago, I couldn't have had this call because my broadband was so bad. But now it's all over the country thanks to David McCourt and his team, and they've rolled it out nationally. And now we have we can deal with the current and future opportunities of remote working. So that type of thing. That's where governments have to reinvent and sit and
yeah,
say, okay, let's try something new here. So, for example, it's public knowledge now that the Irish government have sat down with Enterprise Ireland, and they're about to launch a brand new program that is targeted at companies that are doing a couple of 100 million turnover to bring them to in excess of 1 billion and basically create our own indigenous multinationals. And this is something that has never been done in the world before. And it's incredible thinking by government and by a government agency like Enterprise Ireland. The
yeah.
program is going to be called Atlas, as I understand. So and I'll probably be bidding for it in terms of a tender, but revolutionary, and it's radical. It's great thinking. I think it's going to make a big, big difference. It's going to launch this year, but again, nobody in the world has ever done it. There's no model to follow, and they're just saying, let's start from scratch and let's create something new because we need it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I learned so growing up in America, you grow up incredibly arrogant. You don't know how arrogant you are, but it's a disease, and it's some of it deserved, right? Most
Mm,
of it not deserved. And I remember growing up thinking, this is the greatest country in the world, as everyone should think about their country. And
Yep.
and the first time I went to Japan, I was stunned at the insecurity.
Yes. Mm.
And I've been to Japan maybe 75 times, and some of my best friends in the world are in
Mm.
Japan. But uh, I didn't understand this insecurity.
Mm.
And then I went to Korea for the first time, and I encountered this insecurity,
Mm.
and in Singapore, and in
Mm.
New Zealand, and in
Yes.
Ireland. And I've kind of coined this as island insecurity, right? So there's this, um, and you lose perspective on things. So the U.S. economy is $30 trillion.
Yes.
It grew by a trillion last year. It'll grow by 1.2 trillion or 1.4 trillion this year, no matter how hard we try to mess it up.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
and you know, um, at the top of my head, I don't know the size of the Irish economy, but it's not
Mm.
1 trillion.
No. No.
And that insecurity
Mm.
is what drives innovation and greatness. If you look at Japan as my favorite example, because I kind of watched it, is when I went to work for Sony, my grandfather, I won't tell you the exact quote, but he said, "Oh, that's that Japanese company," but he didn't say Japanese.
Yeah.
And I went to work for Sony in 1986,
Mm.
January 1st, 1986. They were
Wow.
about $1 billion company, and when I left, they were a 40 or $50 billion company.
Wow.
There's always this insecurity that drove them, always
Yeah.
this, "We're gonna get beat, we're gonna get beat, this isn't gonna work."
Mm.
And I see that in Ireland, I see that in our work that we do in New Zealand, where when you
Mm.
go to New Zealand, they don't talk about, like Americans will talk about, "I,"
Mm.
right? They talk about "we."
Mm. That's right. Yeah.
We have to make New Zealand great. And I heard the same thing in Ireland when we went to the Reinvention Summit. It wasn't about my company. It wasn't about
Yeah.
me. It was about the country. And
Yeah.
I think that's a powerful idea,
Mm.
and it's a powerful feeling. I love this idea of Atlas. I love the word Atlas. I love the idea of Atlas.
Mm.
And I think if you want to do it, I think it's going to happen. I
Yeah.
think you'll fail a lot and you'll succeed a lot, and
Yeah, 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 correct. It's
it'll
been signed off by government. The budget is there. There's a tender on its way out, so it's happening. Yeah, they're
yeah,
they're they're going ahead with it. But it was interesting thing that you say. A bunch of investors from Silicon Valley came to Ireland to look at our tech companies,
yeah,
and they heard a lot of pitches from tech companies, and at the end of it, they said to Enterprise Ireland, they said, it's really interesting. We listen to pitches all day long in Silicon Valley. And when we listen to a US pitch, they said they pitch us a Ferrari. And we open the bonnet and we find a Volkswagen. But he said, in Ireland, you pitch us a Volkswagen and we open the bonnet and we find a Ferrari. So that's the
yes,
difference. We're and now we have to learn a little bit to be more bullish is the word I'd used. I wouldn't use the word arrogant, like because you're an incredible nation. We need to be a little bit more bullish, and be able to articulate it, and you know, it's the vision piece. If you can inspire people to believe in your vision, the world will conspire to help you. So hence that belief, we're going to be the greatest, we're going to be the biggest, we are the biggest, the best, etc. That belief
yeah,
system is very important for us. So for example, we know we've work to do on that Atlas program around that, around that belief system and creating a culture within an organization and a national pride, like we did with our rugby team that Aidan would have played with, where we literally could go out and be world class and beat everybody
yeah,
else, even though we're a small island. But the belief system, starting with the belief, ambition and belief, and then ultimately your culture, and I think that can transform economies, and that's what we will have to work on. I think.
yeah. And I think it's it's work worth doing, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
on education, I think I hear the guys in the technology space talk, and even some conversation that we have on and off around folks around Columbia when I'm down there with Rita. The conversation goes quickly to, would you tell? You have a bright young man or woman today, should they go to college or just join a tech firm? All these tech bros are saying, just join a tech firm.
Mm,
You'll get more of an education in 2 years at a tech startup than you will at Columbia, wherever you may want to go. And I think there's some truth in that. There's some power in that idea. And back to this AI conversation, one of Ireland's superpowers has been education,
mm,
highly educated,
mm,
uh, hardworking workforce. What's the future of education look like in Ireland?
mm,
So there's a piece of me that thinks the U.S. won't change, but somebody's going to do it differently.
mm,
Somebody, if we look at, for example, what's happened in the U.S. in terms of trade education, we've destroyed the trade school system in the
mm.
U.S. with
Yeah.
the concept of higher education, which de facto means everything else is lower education, right?
Mm, yeah.
Um, the reinvention of education probably won't happen in the U.S. It's going to
Mm,
happen someplace like Ireland or
mm.
New Zealand or, you know,
Yeah, well, it's
um,
happening in China. Like they made an announcement last year that all of the schools and children from the age of 4 are going to start with AI.
yeah,
And they're going to have AI and they're going to build on top of AI and they're going to understand it and use it and leverage it as, ubiquitous knowledge. I think
yeah,
that's a starting point. I remember, even getting my first calculator and you weren't allowed to use it. I remember
yep,
computers coming out, you weren't allowed to use it. There's no open book exams, very, very few open book exams. You have to learn off and regurgitate. That's where we have to reinvent ourselves in terms of education. But for example, my son is currently doing a commerce degree in a university here in Ireland. And, like that, he was complaining about he wasn't learning a lot. And the courses are, there's very few hours, there's very few lectures, there's very little that's inspirational about it. So he said to me, I'm not learning anything. Now he's having fun. And I said, enjoy the fun part of it. But he came to
yeah,
me one day and he said to me he had to do a year of work experience and he was looking at all the big Ford and the consulting firms and he said, Dad, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to learn anything. So he came to me one day and he said to me, Dad, if you were starting your career again, what would you do if you were me now? I said, that's a brilliant question. I said,
yeah,
years ago
a
when I was,
genius question.
yeah. And I said to him years ago when I was doing commerce, I had the privilege of meeting Tony Ryan from Ryanair as well. And he was offering us jobs, and I thought he was talking billions, and I couldn't get my head around billions like that. So none of us took jobs with him. But I said to him, today I would now go to the likes of a Tony Ryan and say, I will be your executive assistant, but please let me attend all the meetings. I'll carry a workload for you. I'll do everything you want me to do and take work away from you. He said, that's a brilliant idea. I'm going to do that. So then he said to me, what entrepreneur in Ireland should I do that with?
Give me the introduction.
Yeah, exactly. And given my background, and just I know plenty of good guys. So I did put him with one amazing guy who's scaling company and making acquisitions and a really, really good guy. So he worked with him for 9 months and he learned so much by being in the
Yeah,
field and by doing and observing a great person doing an entrepreneurial gig. So this person is acquiring, they have big board, they have private equity, they're raising money, they're doing all the things that in commerce you couldn't get your head around that through a book and through a textbook. So I would hope, and what I've talked a lot about, firstly is apprenticeships. And I don't mean learning how to be a plumber or a brickie, which are great jobs. And those guys are
yeah,
making serious money today because they can command a premium because so few people are going into it. Um, but I mean, literally all of us, and this is where I come into what I do today. I'm at a stage of life where I'm giving back as well. We call it the green jersey. So the former
yeah.
CEO, the CEO that really got this moving, the guy of Enterprise Ireland, he used to phone me and say, Brendan, I need you to put on your green jersey. Now that meant you were going to work for free.
Yeah.
That was okay, because
Yeah.
we've done well and we're in a good place in life. So many people are willing to put on the green jersey, and that is the rally call that we do. And we say to people that have been successful, that got education, that traveled the world and did well, we're saying, put on your green jersey now and let's all rally and let's support this next generation. So we mentor, we coach, we support, etc., etc. So And nearly everybody, if I'd lift the phone to an entrepreneur and say, I want you to do X, Y, or Z, they'll jump and say, yeah, no problem. Where, when? They'll jump on a plane. I have speakers that come to Barcelona for me. Somebody coming to Madrid in the next few weeks, even in New York, people that, and they'll jump on a plane and come over and speak to Irish people in those locations to help and put on the green jersey.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I hear you saying it's an and, right? That, uh, and I think it's an and that the university system, secondary education doesn't go away, but it's got to
Yeah,
evolve. There's a couple of
yeah,
universities here. One of them, Northeastern up in Boston, has this uh, curriculum over you go 4 years, but 1 year is, and I think down in Philly, who is it? There's another school that does this where you go work someplace for a year
yeah.
in the middle of your 4 year.
That's right. Yeah, all the Irish
I think
universities.
that's a step in the right direction, but I think,
Mm.
what your son said is what, I would have, my wife and I put the kids through college, obviously, and you write these really big checks and they go to school for 151 days. And then
Yeah,
within that 151 days, they have class, on,
yeah,
on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, or
right.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. And you're like, wait, why am I writing a
Yeah,
$75,000 check? What's happening here? Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but I do think that there's something to be said for a liberal arts education.
Oh,
There's
absolutely.
something to be said for technical education still, but I think there's an and there that your son probably is experiencing. That is, you know, how do we get how do we get people more engaged in the real world
Mm,
and using some of these tools that we've been talking about,
yeah,
um, and create this environment where resilience can be put back in the system. That,
exactly.
curiosity,
Yeah.
um, creativity.
I hate
Uh,
to say it, but I would argue that, like, well, there's lots of research to support this, but creativity, when you're born, you're fully creative. You're touching, you're feeling, you're tasting, you're
yeah,
creative, you're breaking, you're fixing, you're doing all these things. You're playing. And I hate to say it, but the system knocks that out of you over a period of
yeah,
time. And particularly when you go to university, I remember having arguments with professors in a good way, but they were telling me I was wrong because I had a bigger idea, a bigger vision, bigger picture, etc., etc. And so they would fail me if I didn't regurgitate what they had said. And that can knock creativity out of people because we're trying to get people, I hate to say it, to conform. But what we
yes,
believe is the way things should be based on what we know today. So one of the key things that some of the better universities do, and all your great universities that you have in the US, is to practitioner-based learning where they
yeah,
bring in speakers. I'm sure you've been to many universities as a guest speaker, but when they bring in the practitioners, that's when the light bulb come on for people and
yeah,
people really engage. They really, there's role models and you're learning, and then the academia combined with the practical really can light a fire in somebody because you're given frameworks to say this is
yeah,
how you might go at that, but keep the big thinking, keep the big vision, keep this, that, and the other. So that combination is really powerful, and the universities that do it know how powerful it is. But we need that in the school system too. It's very rare that schools they might bring in the odd parent here or there to speak to the kids, but it
yeah,
needs to be built into it that we're doing real stuff as well as academia, and hence allowing that creativity to flow. My daughter works for a company called Junk Couture, and
uh-huh,
they make fashion out of rubbish. And they're in the US as well, and they're in some of the schools in the US, but they're all over Ireland and they're worldwide at this stage. But they call the sport for creatives is what they do. So
right,
kids that create couture out of rubbish, they create amazing looking gowns, etc., and they put them on stage and have a world final, which they had there a few weeks ago. And it's the sport for creatives. Now we need more of that too,
yeah,
as in we have sport and people on the soccer team, the baseball team, the football team. They're the heroes that are carried around on the shoulders of their schoolmates. But the creatives also need to be carried around on the shoulders of their schoolmates as heroes because they've done something so creative and so innovative.
yeah, yeah. Putting that, getting that embedded in the system is going to be a battle because the
Mm.
society, the new religion of the world is sport. Right,
Yeah.
and we see it all the time. You see it in the
Yes.
US with football and basketball
Mm,
and
mm.
sport being the religion.